Welcome to Oxford News This Week. I'm Elgin Nichols.
And I'm Terry Stiles. And in this week's local news, a hit and run has local police asking for your help. And was a local Oxford Middle School student really robbed?
Stay tuned and learn more about these stories and others. The Oxford News begins right now. The Oakland County Sheriff's Department is asking viewers to report any information you may have concerning a hit and run that happened on Coates Road near Seymour Lake Park. Described as an older vintage vehicle, the car was bright blue and may have been modified as a low rider. The Oxford woman was hit from behind while walking along Coates Road. The driver then fishtailed away from the scene without stopping to see if the woman was injured. Fortunately, her injuries were not serious, but she did suffer bruises and scratches. The injured woman would like to know what kind of person would not stop and help, but instead ran away. And police, they would like to know too. So, if you have information about the car or driver, call the Oakland County Sheriff at 248-969-3077.
The kindness of neighbors proved a good outcome in the village of Oxford last week. A concerned Oxford Village resident sent police to check on his neighbor after hearing what he believed to be a gunshot. The man explained to the police that he hadn't seen his neighbor for several days, which was unusual. On checking the Pearl Street residence, police found the man well and thanked the caller for keeping an eye on his neighbor.
A suspected heroin overdose brought Oakland County Sheriff deputies to assist paramedics saving the life of a passenger of a pickup truck where a syringe was found at the scene. The man was transported to a nearby hospital and the case remains open pending test results.
A Crossroads for Youth was arrested on assault and battery charges on a fellow student. Further action will be determined after a complete investigation.
An Oxford Middle School student who reported to his mother that he was approached and robbed by a hooded man on his way to school has now rescinded that story. After the mother called police about the robbery, they notified the school, who sent out an alert to all parents to have their children be careful. Now, police questioned the boy, who kept changing details in his story. Finally, officers learned that the boy made up the story because he didn't want to go to school that morning. The mother thinks the young man is about to learn one of life's many lessons.
Rather than drafting and enacting a new ordinance to deal with properties that sport overgrown weeds and grass, Oxford Township officials voted 6-0 to formalize an informal policy. The proposed policy, submitted by trustee Jack Curtis, requests that whenever a complaint is made to the township supervisor or his representative would personally investigate and determine one of three things: if the property is occupied, if there are issues such as health, safety, or welfare concerns, or if it is an economic detriment to the community. After discussion with the property owner and no resolve, a complaint would then be sent to the township's enforcement officer, who is authorized to issue a series of fines against the homeowner. Curtis is in favor of the procedural route, as the alternative could cost taxpayers up to $2,500 to have a township planner produce a new ordinance.
And what is the secret to staying married for 65 years? According to Shirley Connors, Mr. Connor is the head of the household and he wears the pants in the family. And she tells him what pair to wear. The couple have a great spirit and sense of humor, and before she married, Shirley said that her mother told her never to go to bed angry, which must be the key because the Connors had 11 children. Mr. Connor agrees with his wife and said he enjoys spending his time with his wife, sitting at a card game and for a whole day, and volunteering at the Oxford Orient Fish Pantry, and it keeps them occupied together. The Connors have lived in Oxford since 1945, and as a Roseman, Shirley's ancestors were among the first to settle in Oxford. Bill served in the U.S. Navy and Army in the 40s and 50s and retired after 36.5 years of service to General Motors. In addition to raising 11 kids, Shirley was a physician's assistant for 30 years. For folks in their 80s, they sure look great, and people who know them say that they are a real joy to meet. From all of us at Oxford Community Television, happy 65th.
I do happen to know those people, and they are lovely. They lived across the street from us for years, and speaking of keeping a watchful eye on your neighbors, they do just that. Now I want to go to some of the official business that we really didn't get a chance to discuss on the news.
Uh-oh.
But the township not being pleased about the village's decision to put weight limits on Burdick Street that goes through town. I have to say, I would agree with the village council on that one. And being a resident or former resident of the village, those homes are old. And our home was, you know, rattling. You could hear the windows rattle when those trucks went by. So. Yep,
there were a lot of rattlers. I think, you know, the supervisor of the township, Bill Dunn, actually made a quote in the Leader newspaper, the last edition, that he felt that it was up to the village to provide that service, that road for those trucks. And I think the council, what they did is they looked at the fact that the tax money and so forth come to the township from the gravel industry, that none of that money goes to the village, but yet the village was receiving the blunt of this traffic and having to rework the highway or the road. Another point that I think Mr. Dunn was making was that this road was designed for truck traffic. That's not the fact at all. That road was designed to handle the heavy traffic that comes through there, which are hundreds and hundreds of cars which travel that.
Traffic.
Right, and not designed for trucks, but designed for that road to last for quite a while. They spent $500,000, right?
Right, and I know the village on several occasions has asked for assistance in repairing that road because the majority of the traffic is township traffic. People are coming to and from our village from a very large township. So.
And the fact is that actually the village had to come up with the money to repair it, you know, over $500,000. Very little assistance. Didn't get anything from the state of Michigan, nothing from the county, and very little in terms of supplement, you know, from the township.
Right.
The thing is, this is a problem that involves us, the voters, the people that the township has to service because they're within their area, providing the tax base. The township should have been looking at this a long time ago to provide a circumvention for those trucks. At some point, they got to understand that the villagers are not going to want to have this traffic continue. It's kind of like running, in the old days, cows down the middle of your street.
Right.
They don't want these cows anymore. So.
Well, no, I've heard residents, I read some of the comments the residents made that people bought into the village knowing that those trucks were there. All is true. But whether they bought into it knowing it or not, those homes, that historic village can and will fall apart from that traffic. Not to mention, it's very hard to monitor those gravel trucks when they're blowing through town, and I mean it, blowing through town. They don't slow down. They don't respect the traffic limits, which means then the village, the onus is on the village to pay for another traffic police officer to keep those trucks slowed down. Go down M24 or Burdick and try to pull out onto those two streets.
Yep, and I think the truth of the matter is that new road wasn't built for trucks. It was built to last a long time for the traffic.
That's right.
So there we have it.
Now we said our opinion. That's it for Oxford News this week. If you'd like to learn more about the stories you just heard or other stories, stop by your local store and pick up a copy of the Oxford Leader newspaper. And coming up on OCTV, Oxford Local Sports with Andy Curtis and Oxford School News with John Ochins. And then join us with Auto Talk and Science in the News with Dave Kenny. That's it for Oxford News this week. I'm Terry Stiles, and this is where your local news is closer to home. And I'm Elgin Nichols. Remember, always be kind to your friends and neighbors, and thanks for watching.
Don't miss Schooling Around with John Ochins, weekdays at 11 in the morning and 10 at night, keeping it local.
I'm going back to school, no more vacation, I gotta get my say.
Watch My Life with John Ochins, weekdays at 10 and 5. Catch some of the great stories and folks from Addison and Oxford Townships, keeping it local.
Welcome to this edition of Auto Talk. I'm Dave Kenny, and these stories are taken from the publication Automotive News. In our first story, Fiat SPA will locate its new global headquarters in London's West End, opting for the most expensive office district in the world. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles NV, the entity that will be created from Fiat's merger with U.S. unit Chrysler Group LLC, agreed to lease 3 floors in a building on St. James Street that also houses the Economist magazine, Jonathan Stern, and a partner at Mellish & Harding. The new offices are about a 10-minute walk from Buckingham Palace. Fiat CEO Sergio Marchionne chose London for the new headquarters to represent the group's ambitions to become a global automotive power. The city is also neutral territory between the Italian car maker's former home in Turin and Chrysler's historic association with Detroit. Fiat Chrysler, which will be the world's 7th largest car maker, plans to embark on a $71 billion expansion plan to better compete with bigger rivals such as Volkswagen AG and General Motors. The merger is set to be finalized next month, with shares to start trading on the New York Stock Exchange on October 13th. Fiat, which was previously based in a villa adjacent to the company's former Lingotto factory, expects to have its first board meeting at the new offices in late October. And back home, General Motors says that it will build a new top-end, high-technology Cadillac at its Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant starting in the 4th quarter of next year. GM declined to name the car, saying only that it would be slotted between the CTS midsize sedan and the XTS large sedan. Sources have told Automotive News that GM plans to build a large rear-wheel drive sedan codenamed LTS at the plant starting in late 2015. The objective for this upcoming model is to lift the Cadillac range by entering the elite class of top luxury cars, Cadillac President Johan Donetian said in a statement. Currently in development, this new rear-wheel drive oriented sedan uses completely new custom-designed materials on a unique vehicle architecture. GM said the car will be unveiled sometime during the first half of 2015. The company said it will soon announce the car's name. GM said that over the last 5 years it has invested more than $1 billion in the Detroit Hamtramck plant, which also makes the Chevrolet Impala, Malibu, and Volt, and the Cadillac ELR. GM calls the factory its most complex plant in North America because it builds several different models and platforms on one line. The new sedan will be the first to use GM's new rear-wheel drive platform codenamed Omega. It's expected to get the same 3.6-liter twin-turbo V6 and Aisin-supplied 8-speed that runs the CTS V-Sport, and all-wheel drive will be optional, so save your bucks. And on the legal front, information gathered by vehicle telematics systems such as General Motors OnStar, Ford Sync, BMW's Connect Drive, and others is garnering increased attention from lawyers who see the data as a puzzle piece in building court cases. It's a sign that privacy concerns raised about telematics won't go away soon. At least the industry's quest to be the closer to consumers through telematics has created new responsibilities involving data management. Those responsibilities include complying with court orders to turn over telematics data, which automakers say they have done. The privacy terms for Connect Drive's BMW Assist component says it may collect and retain an electronic or other record of a person's location or direction of travel at a given time, providing another potential legal tool for lawyers to go along with cell phone records, vehicle black boxes, and even airbag modules. And that may irk consumers who worry about an all-seeing eye keeping tabs on their travels. Of course, limited vehicle data can't stand alone, experts say. The data must be backed by other evidence. But lawyers say they're interested in using the data to build cases. Well, that's all for this edition of Auto Talk. I'm Dave Kenny, and as always, may the wind be at your back as you cruise down life's highways. Stay tuned to Oxford Community Television, and we'll be right back.
Discover the wonderful surprises of local shopping. Watch Let's Take a Walk with Susan Bork or Andy Curtis, weekdays at 10:30 and 6:30, keeping it local. OCTV brings you some humor to relieve the excitement of local meetings. Watch Elgin and David explain the local politics with Minutes by Minutes, weekdays at 11:30 in the morning and 10:30 in the evening, keeping it local.
I'm Elgin Nichols.
And I'm Dave Kenny. Each week, catch us on Minutes by Minute.
Don't miss it.
I'm John Ochins, and welcome to the Oxford Wildcats School Update. Auto technology is one of our high school departments revving up for the new year. A lot of scholarships and awards are at stake here. We checked in with teacher Dan Balsley to find out what's going through his mind.
What I'd like to do is make this a special event. In the past, I've had a brake service competition for our Autotech 1 students. I covered the brake unit, and then I started out years ago just timing them in the disassembly and reassembly of drum brakes, and it had grown to something huge. So over the last few years, we've been disassembling, reassembling, timing them, splitting up in teams. I've got community sponsorship now, so we give away $1,000, $500 to $1,000 worth of prizes each year. People in the community, Oxford Rotary Club, and so on have stepped up and really helped make this an event.
See that 66 Plymouth to his right, to his left, actually?
So this is
you see that 66 Plymouth to his left? I had one like that. Yeah, I had that. Was
and we're actually doing this
I had that car when it was fairly new.
Between teams and awarding prizes, and they practice for it. So I wanted to do something like this for the other class levels. And I got the idea about a year ago to have what I'm calling a mini mites. It's a version of the mites competition, but again, just for my students in their class as kind of a way of making their training interesting. So it's one of the things that I'm excited about this year is I'm going to try this with my Autotech 2-3 group. I'm going to have the Autotech 3 students act as judges for the Autotech 2 students that are going to be competitors.
Dan also fills us in on some of our local sponsors.
The Oxford Rotary Club, because they have been such a good supporter of the program for so many years, but Oxford Bank has also been a real good supporter. Steve's Oxford Automotive has always been there, not only on a daily basis, supplying us with parts that we need just for day-to-day operation, but they step up and sponsor our brake competition too. Oxford McDonald's has always stepped up and given us something many times, meals for anyone who competes in the competition. Right Tool Company is a big sponsor also. And in the past we've had Napa and Snap-on and Craftsman, but that's been kind of hit and miss.
Skelnick pitches in too, don't they?
Skelnick has pitched in a different way. They're supplying us with the vehicle that we need to train on for the state and national competitions in the AAA Ford.
Over at Oxford High, Assistant Principal Kurt Noose tells us about some Mexican visitors who will be visiting us next month from our sister school.
2 years ago, we established a sister school with Puebla, Mexico, and it is a real sister school relationship where we do some exchanges, we Skype, we share some assignments with them, but the highlight of it is they send a school, Cinco de Mayo High School in Puebla, Mexico, which is a beautiful area, historic area, that they send 10 to 12 students to us in October, and we basically adopt them for 2 weeks. They live with host families of students, they experience school, they experience some local culture, and then our students get to go down there at the same time in May, and into June for 2 weeks, where they experience all the things that Puebla has to experience. They get immersed in the language, and it's a fairly minimal cost to students where they pay airfare, and then everything else is covered by host families as reciprocation back and forth.
If you would like to volunteer as a host family, you should contact the high school. That's the school update for this week. Dave Kenny is next with Science in the News, followed by Wildcat Sports. This is Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.
Congratulations, OCTV, as the 2014 winner of the American Legion's Best Electronic Media Award, symbolizing your efforts to provide meaningful coverage of veterans issues and patriotic activities, as well as the American Legion.
I'm Andy Curtis, and this is your Oxford Sports Update. Well, the steamroller that is Wildcat football improved to 3-0 with an impressive 56-20 win over OAA rival Troy Athens on Friday. Now leading the Oxford offensive onslaught was Scott Stubenrosch, who rushed for an impressive 195 yards on 20 carries with 2 touchdowns. Adding to the fun was John Patrick, who also had 2 rushing touchdowns, and Anson Rowley, Matthew Harris, Brendan Lewis, who all chipped in with 1 rushing touchdown each. Now, it wasn't just the ground game that put a hurt on the Athenians. Cat QB Glacier Wallington went 3 for 7 with 67 yards and 1 passing touchdown to William Home. Now, thanks to Ken Swart for the Oakland Press for providing the pictures from Friday's game. Up next for the Wildcats, they invite the mistake by the Lake Orion Dragons into the comfy confines of Wildcat Stadium for this season's installment of the heated crosstown rivalry. And of course, OCTV Sports will be there covering all the action this Friday. Now, the football field wasn't the only place Oxford beat down on Troy Athens over the week, with the varsity girls swim team taking first place over the Redhawks last Thursday, and standout Wildcat Janie Bukinski scoring an impressive 231.85 to set a new school diving record. Other winners were Taylor Curtis taking the 200-meter freestyle, Allison Miller taking first in the 50-meter freestyle, and Bella Ginola winning the 100-meter butterfly with an impressive time of 1 minute and 6.20 seconds. All right, so now let's jump over to our beloved local pro teams, starting with the good news. And finally, the good news means the Tigers, who are playing like the Tigers should be, sweeping the visiting Indians of Cleveland over the weekend and taking a nice 1.5 game first place lead in the AL Central. The game Sunday was favoring Cleveland until the 7th inning when Ian Kinsler, who's only homered twice since July, rocketed a 2-run blast to propel the Tigers to a 6-4 win. On the opposite side of things, though, Sunday, the same old Lions lost like the same old Lions usually do, 24-7 in Carolina to the Panthers. With Stafford only going 27 for 48 and 291 yards and 1 touchdown, the running game really never got established, and drafted kicker Nate Freese missed 2 49-yard field goals, making him now an impressive 0-3 on kicks between 40 and 49 yards, and putting the Lions at a 1-1 record for the young season. Some good news, though, is I won my fantasy football game this weekend, making me 2-0 and seated firmly in the early elite ranks of my league. Now for today's sports vocab word of the day. Intentional grounding. Intentional grounding is when the passer who is looking at a potential sack or other loss of yardage throws a pass without a realistic chance of completion. Now, this won't be called if the quarterback is out of the pocket and throws a pass that lands beyond the line of scrimmage. Now, I am Andy Curtis, and remember, you can catch all of our broadcasts of your favorite Oxford High School games between 1 and 6 right here at OCTV, or check us out online under the programs section of OCCTV.org. And as I remind you every week, this is your community station, so if you have a sports idea, shoot us an email at andrewcurtis23@gmail.com and put OCTV Sports in the subject line. That was all the sports news you need to know. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.
You're watching Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.
Welcome to Science in the News. I'm Dave Kenny, and these stories are taken from the publication New Scientist. In our first story, the International Space Station is getting its first 3D printer. In the future, NASA hopes to print tools and replacement parts in orbit. But first, they need to figure out how to make the machine work without gravity. The printer was set to launch last week, and no word yet on what the astronauts plan to make first. We'll hope and see. And on Mars, the Mars rover Curiosity has finally reached the base of Mount Sharp, the mountain it has been driving towards since it landed on the red planet in August of 2012. Over the rest of the mission, the rover will drill rocks in search of chemistry that could preserve organics while driving gingerly through the hills to spare its damaged wheels. Wow. And back on Earth, the hole in the ozone layer is closing up. Thanks to the 1987 Montreal Protocol, which clamped down on the use of ozone-destroying chemicals like CFCs, say Freon, the layer is on course to recover in the next few decades, according to the UN Environment Program. That's good news. And on the digital front, it's a lot of money for some digital bricks. Microsoft has agreed to buy cult video Minecraft and the studio behind it, Mojang, for $2.5 billion. Not much for Microsoft. They got big pockets. Minecraft, that is, lets players create almost anything out of bricks in a pixelated, open-ended virtual world. It has sold more than 54 million copies. And back on the space front, NASA has announced that two private companies, Boeing and SpaceX, will start launching astronauts to the International Space Station in 2017. The agency is spending about $6.8 billion on a fleet of space taxis that will blast off from U.S. soil. NASA has set the stage for what promises to be the most ambitious and exciting chapter in the history of human spaceflight, says NASA Administrator Charles Bolden. In 2010, NASA began funding the development of private manned spacecraft to serve as a replacement for the Space Shuttle, which was retired in 2011 after 30 years of flying. NASA hoped it would be cheaper to stimulate firms to build private vehicles that it could buy rides on rather than it would be to create its own spacecraft. NASA has announced that Boeing and SpaceX will receive contracts of $4.2 billion and $2.6 billion respectively, with the first taxis due to launch from Cape Canaveral in 2017. Both firms will fly between 2 and 6 missions. NASA has been reliant on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft to deliver astronauts to the ISS, paying $70 million per seat for this privilege. This is a sore point for some U.S. politicians, but Russia's annexation of the Crimea and subsequent cooling of U.S.-Russia space relations has made finding a replacement for the shuttle even more pressing. Boeing is an industry stalwart, having been involved with the Apollo missions to the moon and the same space shuttle program. The design for its CST-100 capsule echoes the Apollo command module and can seat 7 people. It will launch on an Atlas V rocket, a commonly used U.S. launch vehicle manufactured by United Launch Alliance, a joint venture between Boeing and Lockheed Martin. SpaceX is the young upstart with an increasing space presence. It already delivers cargo to the ISS with its Dragon capsule. A new version of the Dragon, unveiled earlier this year, will carry up to 7 astronauts and eventually land back on solid ground rather than splash down in the ocean. It will launch on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, which the company plans to make reusable. Both companies are yet to fly their spacecraft. Their contracts with NASA say they must perform at least 1 crewed test flight to the ISS and at least 1 NASA astronaut on board before they can start regular taxi runs. Rumors also suggest that Boeing will announce a partnership with Blue Origin, a firm founded by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, to develop a new rocket engine. The current rocket engines for the Atlas V rocket are supplied by, guess who? Russia, which has threatened to cut off the supply. And further out in space, the European Space Agency has announced the landing site for its Rosetta mission to Comet 67 Churyumov-Gerasimenko, wow, what a name, following a meeting this weekend to whittle down a short list of 5 possibilities. Philae will be released in mid-November. The exact date will be confirmed later this month and take 7 hours to reach the comet's surface. Rosetta will have to constantly maneuver as it orbits 67P to keep in touch with Philae and let ESA monitor the landing process. When Philae lands, its first task will be snapping a 360-degree panorama of the surface along with measurements of the gas pressure and dust distribution at the landing site. Later, it will drill down beneath the surface and analyze pristine comet material. It is hoped that Philae will also see jets of gas and dust emerging from nearby pits as the comet heats up as it travels toward the sun. Well, That's it for this edition of Science in the News. I'm Dave Kenny. Stay tuned to Oxford Community Television, and we'll be right back.
You're watching Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.